The Objective News Network, breaking news. JPMorgan Chase Bank is in cahoots with the federal and superior courts of New Jersey to cover up billions of dollars in mortgage fraud against American homeowners. Hello, this is John Hnatio reporting for the Objective News Network. We have just received a copy of the Amicus Curiae brief that was sent today to Judge David H. Bauman of the Superior Court of New Jersey, Chancery Division, by the Institute for Complexity Management, or ICM for short. The report is absolutely explosive because it provides clear and compelling evidence that several U.S. government agencies, JPMorgan Chase Bank, and the courts are engaged in a national mortgage fraud scheme to continue to bill homeowner victims of the Washington Mutual Bank, or WAMO, collapse out of their homes worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The 2006 WAMO bank collapse was the largest bank failure in U.S. history. The Amicus Curiae brief, or Friend of the Court brief, makes 31 startling findings resulting from an ICM year-long investigation of a criminal RICO, or racketeering influence corrupt organization, and the case of a New Jersey homeowner who was victimized by fraudulent court proceedings that were initiated by JPMorgan Chase Bank to foreclose on the homeowner's residence in Wall, New Jersey. The homeowner is this man, Nicholas E. Purpura, who is an 82-year-old disabled veteran who has suffered through an 8-year ordeal at the hands of the criminal RICO mortgage fraud enterprise, consisting of government officials, including corrupt law enforcement, corrupt judges of the federal and New Jersey courts, and JPMorgan Chase Bank and their attorneys across the country. The ICM report discloses that corrupt government officials actually allowed JPMorgan Chase Bank to falsely claim ownership of homes that they knew, the federal government agencies, that JPMorgan Chase did not legally own, and then pursued a 10-step scheme to steal the houses of innocent homeowners worth hundreds of billions of dollars. First, in the absence of original archival proof of ownership documentation, properly signed and certified at the time of closing, JPMorgan Chase Bank contacted former WAMO mortgage note holders. The mortgage note holders were deceived by JPMorgan Chase Bank to falsely believe that the bank legally owned their mortgage notes, as required by law for them to engage with any homeowners or initiate any foreclosure proceedings in any court of law, at least in the United States. This was used by JPMorgan Chase Bank to force, under duress and coercion, the renegotiation of new mortgage notes, often with higher payments, but this time directly with JPMorgan Chase Bank itself. Thus, the mortgage notes entered between homeowners and JPMorgan Chase Bank were fraudulent. When the homeowner defaulted because of the increased payments, JPMorgan Chase Bank and their large cadre of foreclosure lawyers across the entire nation very quickly and very adeptly moved in to expedite the foreclosure process before these homeowners could learn of the underlying fraud. In the case of Nick Purpura, ICM found clear and compelling evidence that certain members of the federal and New Jersey judiciary intentionally, and I want to repeat that word, intentionally, turned a blind eye and refused to act on clear and compelling evidence put before their courts, demonstrating that no original archivally preserved, signed, dated, and properly certified at the actual time of the original closing, proof of ownership documentation was actually possessed by JP Morgan Chase Bank. Then, these very same judges proceeded to allow JP Morgan Chase Bank to pursue an unlawful mortgage foreclosure proceeding against the victim, despite the fact that JP Morgan Chase Bank never owned their homes in the first place. The courts then acted on behalf of JP Morgan Chase Bank to intentionally suppress, yes, intentionally suppress evidence that the bank was forging, fabricating, and tampering with documents to create their own, as it turns out, fraudulent proof of ownership documentation and submit it to the court. The court then aided and abetted JP Morgan Chase Bank by allowing them to repeatedly submit forged, altered, and fabricated proof of ownership documentation, even though they had been told that JP Morgan Chase did not have any proof whatsoever of ownership documentation. Former homeowners holding WAMU mortgage notes, no longer being in the financial position to afford legal assistance because of the increased mortgage payments and the economic times imposed by JP Morgan Chase, were eventually evicted from their homes. The proceeds from foreclosure sales were and still are being shared among JP Morgan Chase Bank, their cadre of attorneys, and other members of the criminal RICO mortgage fraud enterprise from across the nation. Just take a look at some of the findings of the ICM report. The picture of absolute corruption across the entire U.S. government is completely astounding. We at ONN have never seen, nor have we ever heard of anything like this before in the United States. Now, before we get into what the criminal RICO mortgage fraud enterprise operates, we must tell our viewers that JP Morgan Chase Bank is absolutely, and I mean absolutely, no stranger to mortgage fraud and massive violations of mortgage law and banking regulations. JP Morgan Chase Bank has paid, get this, $38.995 billion for banking, securities, and additional federal fines since the year 2000. JP Morgan Chase Bank continues to engage in the criminal mortgage fraud enterprise simply because they are raking in more stolen money than they are paying in federal fines. One finding says that the WAMU mortgage note on the Purpura residence was a purposely fraudulent instrument under the New Jersey Homeowners Protection Act because it was usurious. Another finding says that the Purpura mortgage note was legally declared by the state of Delaware as uncollectible, well before JP Morgan Chase Bank and the federal and New Jersey courts initiated foreclosure proceedings against Nicholas Purpura. Several other findings expose the judges of the courts refused to consider the expert testimony of a criminal forensic expert that JP Morgan Chase Bank and their lawyers forged, altered, tampered with, and fabricated completely fraudulent proof of ownership documents and then submitted them to the courts. The real rub is that the ICM report demonstrates that the corrupt judges knew about the fraud all along. The ICM report also reveals that judges conspired to break the law when they ordered the sheriff of Monmouth County to immediately sell the Purpura residence in violation of another federal court stay. Complete anarchy of courts that are supposed to be providing justice to innocent victims of crime like Nick Purpura. There are over 25 equally disturbing and perhaps more disturbing findings, just like these in the ICM report, that is now available to ONN subscribers and our viewers at the ICM website at this URL. ONN invites and encourages our subscribers to take a look for yourself at the other things that the ICM investigators found. We think that you will find the situation not only disturbing, but revolting. The Amicus Curiae brief submitted to the courts is all the more remarkable because it shows that the government agencies who are supposed to be managing and investigating mortgage fraud were advised repeatedly of exactly what was going on, all the way from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the Federal Reserve Board, the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Attorney General of the state of New Jersey, and many others, all of whom either ignored or refused to investigate the crimes against the American people that were taking place. Again, we here at ONN have to admit that we have never seen anything like the results of this ICM investigation. It is absolute proof of the corruption across all three branches of our government, all the way from the state of New Jersey up through the federal agencies that all of us rely on to enforce the law. In this case, the federal agencies themselves were engaged in breaking the law themselves. It is what it is for Friday, December 21st, 2023. Thank you so much for watching, and please join us by subscribing. This is John Hnatio reporting for the Objective News Network. We look forward to hearing your comments on this incredible breaking news story, and we encourage you to write or call the chairman of the House and Senate Committees on the Judiciary, Jim Jordan and Dick Durbin, respectively. Their contact information appears below. Again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you the next time.